Well, welcome to another Fortuna MBA Admissions Masterclass. This is the second in a series of 4 webinars in which our team of former admissions gatekeepers will be taking you through the essays, very specifically the essays. We won't be talking about letters of recommendation, GMAT scores, but the essays that are at the heart of the applications to the world's top business schools. Now, last week, I was joined by 3 former experts from Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton, providing some fantastic insights and advice for the essays for Boston, Palo Alto, and Philadelphia. And I do encourage any of our viewers today, if you missed that session, it is available on Fortuna's YouTube channel. I think the address is in front of everyone there. It's 60 minutes of great insight. I'm setting the bar very high for today's panelists. Because today it's the turn of the other M7 schools. We'll be looking at Chicago Booth, MIT Sloan, Columbia Business School, and Northwestern Kellogg. We've all talked about how this might be a record-breaking year for applications to the top business schools, unprecedented levels of competition and selectivity that implies, not just with perhaps more candidates, but maybe more candidates considering applying to more schools, given how selective it's going to be. And we hope that the next 60 minutes is going to provide each of you with the ideas, the inspiration. Symonds, I write about Bloomberg, the BBC, and with our hosts for Poets and Quants, I also run the Centre Court MBA Festival that brings together all of the gatekeepers of the top schools. It's also my privilege to be a co-director at Fortuna Admissions, and I work with admissions directors, former admissions officers from 15 of the top 18 of the world's business schools. So with all of those colleagues, I get to speak to many, many thousands of MBA. Welcome, and perhaps Bill, forgive me for having to jump back in. You spent 22 years at Booth, and I was just asking if you had known that applications were about to jump to such record levels, would you have been excited or alarmed?
Well, from a school standpoint, I would have been delighted. From an applicant standpoint, alarmed is probably a little strong, but it is going to be a challenging and competitive year coming up. So the onus is really on all of the candidates to do a great job of putting their applications together. Schools are going to be spending a lot of time taking hard looks at all of them, and still want to do the best you possibly can.
Right, there's always a tough numbers game. So I guess, well, we'll be looking at all of those Booth essays with you later on and how to share that personal story. Karen, in terms of timing, now, of course, Columbia Business School is the only school among the M7 that operates with a rolling admission system. And they also have this early decision option before the first week of October. Now, should that timing be paramount in an applicant strategy, or is it just making sure that you get your story straight?
Good question. I get asked that a lot around this time of year. I wouldn't say paramount. I would say timing is important. I recognize some names in the participant list who have heard my rant that timing is not more important than your candidacy, right? And we talked about this a little bit in round 3 when people were rushing to kind of hit those extended deadlines. And to me, you need to apply when you'll be the strongest candidate. And if you're the strongest candidate now for early decision deadlines, great. And if you need some more time to be a strong candidate, finish taking the GMAT, polish your essays, then you're better off waiting until you're more competitive.
Now, the focus, of course, this is one of Fortuna's MBA essay masterclasses. But when you look at the MIT Sloan application, Brittany, it's something that you know very well, and you've written for Business Insider and others about this Sloan application. There are a couple of things in there that no other M7 school has. They've got this organizational chart. There's the 60-second video statement. Now, does that mean with all of those other elements that the essay holds less weight for Rod and the team at Sloan?
I don't think so at all. So I feel like MIT is very intentional about how they've set up their application. And there's really an expectation that, and I'm sure some of the other speakers today will talk about this, that when you think about essays, that every word tells. And I think that holds true for every component of the MIT application, that they're using different components of the app to really learn more about you and to add just a lot of color and context to your candidacy. So I don't think that the cover letter, which is sort of the primary written component, matters any less at all. So every part really counts.
Right. And of course, we will have Kellogg, and we'll be looking at their essays. Now, Toby Cortelyou was formerly a director of admissions and marketing at Chicago Booth, and then drove up the road to that beautiful Northwestern campus in Evanston. That's just a short drive, Toby. But that difference in culture between Booth and Kellogg, is that really something for applicants to capture and convey in their applications?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. It's a really beautiful drive, for what it's worth. Anybody that has a chance to take it, I encourage it. But the cultures at Booth and Kellogg are so distinct and so, I think, protected by the admissions officers. I think that rather than describing how you're a fit for one as opposed to the other, I think focusing on the particular school that you're applying to is absolutely the way to go. I think that there's this kind of perception out there that the teams at Kellogg and Booth are kind of sharks and jets from West Side Story, when that isn't necessarily the case, right? There's no reason to assume that a person might not be a fit at both institutions, but focusing on how you're a fit for the specific culture that you're applying to, I believe is certainly the way to go.
Right. Well, certainly I think that's going to come across in the discussion that we have. Now, I'd mentioned earlier that this is the second in a series of looking at the essays of each of the top schools. And next Wednesday, we'll be looking at some of the S7 schools, Berkeley, Fuqua, Anderson, and Yale. And a week after that, at some of the top European and international business schools with LBS, INSEAD, and HEC Paris. So I hope that you can all join us for that. But today it's about the M7, and very specifically for Booth, Columbia, Sloan, and Kellogg, and picking up on Toby's point about culture, fit, and then back to what Bill said of it's your story and how you're going to capture that and put that across. So we're going to start with Booth, and I'll turn to you, Bill, given your great knowledge of the school. Up on the screen, we have the two questions for this year. One of them looks like that sort of classic career goals essay with a very specific word limit. And then the next one starts to look at personal growth and sharing your experience. So we'll get started. Can you talk us through those two essays and how our viewers can best approach them?
Sure, Matt. So the two questions, and if we talk about the first one first, kind of what is it you want to do and how is Booth going to help you get there? One of the things I'd like to tell candidates is, a lot of folks talk about their career goals and what they want to do, and they want to be in this industry or in this role or have this title. And that's all well and good. But for a question like this, the why behind the goal is as important as the goals themselves. So why is it that you want to do that? What is it about that industry? What is it about that position that excites you? What is it about your background and interests outside of work that have led you in that particular direction? So providing some context for what those goals are is critically important, not simply here's what I want to do, but the why is something that you really need to think through and have a logical extension of things you've already done, whether that comes from your prior career positions or your outside interests. And my second point here is related, is to make sure that you talk in depth about what led you to pursue those goals. What is it about your background, personality, experiences that provided the foundation? So for example, if you have a personality that really likes lots of different things, that you like to explore new elements around the world, if you like to dabble in many, many different things, that could be a natural lead into going to consulting, for example, because you like to explore many different things and don't want to be doing one particular thing. On the other hand, you may say, I've always enjoyed really delving deeply into a particular topic and really understanding it left and right and upside and down. And that might lead you a different career goal. So what is it about your background, your interests, your prior experience that leads you to that particular goal. And finally, the goals are also not simply about this title, but what impact do you want to have? So if you are interested in pursuing a role in consulting or in perhaps in banking, what is it that you really want to have happen? What kind of impact do you want to have on the organization? What impact do you want to have on the world? What influence do you want to have? So thinking more about the result of that role and that goal rather than the goal itself. I think all of those things are important parts of that first story that you're trying to tell.
Now the reality, Bill, is that you're going to spend 2 incredible years with a very talented, diverse, open-minded, ambitious bunch of classmates. So, I mean, does the Booth admissions office expect you to have it all mapped out, or is it really just, you know, given background, certain passions, enthusiasms, or experience that you have, just for that to really make sense to them?
It really is just to make sense. I mean, I tell candidates all the time, nobody's going to come back to you 2 years hence and say, well, the goal you put on your application isn't the one you actually decided to pursue, therefore we're going to take your degree away. But it's rather, how do you tell a story where what you want to do makes sense in light of what you've done in the past and who you are and what the MBA program can do for you, in this case, Booth. So making sure that the story flows. Here's what I've done. Here's what I'm interested in. Here are the things I like to do. Here's what I still need to gain. And Booth is going to help me gain that. And that will then prepare me, along with my prior career experience, for what I want to do in the future.
Got it. Now, we talk about the cultures of schools, and
Matt,
you address this point.
Yeah, all right, great. That's exactly what I wanted to do here. So, and you touched on it with Toby and his comments. You should make sure that you understand what makes Booth unique. And, you know, although it may not be Jets and Sharks, each of the schools has a particular view of what it is and what makes it unique. And certainly at Booth, the Booth admissions folks are very proud of what makes Booth Booth. And so you need to understand that and be able to talk about particular programmings, particular extracurricular activities, particular philosophy of education that Booth is very, very proud of, and make sure that that is reflected in your essays and that you understand and make sure that it's a fit with what you are interested in. So the idea of discipline-based education, where, you know, Booth is very proud of the fact that its faculty members come from the domains of psychology, sociology, economics, statistics, and that you develop insights through each of those lenses. Also very data focused and decision based on data, a very important part of Booth's own view of itself. So understanding that perspective, I think, is incredibly important as you talk about what Booth can do for you in this essay. And then finally, as I think I've said so far, you're telling the story of who you are, where you want to go, what you've done to prepare, and how Booth in particular is going to help you take that next step. And that's really just a narrative that hopefully is compelling, logical, and again, not something anybody's going to hold you to 2 years from now, but hopefully you actually feel that way about it at the moment, and it's something you can talk about not only in the essay, but in an interview when that happens.
Right, and of course, the Booth, as with other schools during the pandemic, I think, you know, they're bending over backwards to be able to provide webinars, info sessions, you know, to really be able to find out more about the culture, and of course, how that then aligns perhaps with you and your next steps.
Exactly.
Then you also talk about, you know, your personality, not just the school's personality, and how that emerges in the second essay for Booth.
Yeah, the second essay is a place to go wild. I mean, talk about whatever you want to talk about. We talk about hobbies, you can talk about interests, you can talk about travel, to give the admissions committee a little bit different sense of who you are. Not only in the things that you do, but in the way that you write. I mean, the first essay is going to be, you know, there's a lot of those goal essays are going to be similar in the kind of the flow that they have. On this essay, you have a chance to kind of really do something very, very different. It's almost a creative writing exercise, if you're comfortable with that. So really trying to get across what makes you a little bit different, what makes you interesting, what makes you the kind of person that other students would like to spend a couple of years with. And so you have the sense of, you have the opportunity to really kind of give a broader picture of what makes you interesting. So what are you passionate about? What excites you? And the key again of all of this is, why is that the case? Not simply stating, I like to do this, but why? What does that do for you? What have you learned from that? How has that changed your perspective on the world? How has that made you a better candidate for an MBA program?
Yeah, yeah. I love your final bullet point, just this idea of there being no right or wrong answer. You know, we have applicants that come to Fortuna and they're so eager to make sure that you know, that what they share resonates. But you know, writing from the heart, it's your story, right? And you know, as you start to build from that point and thinking about the self-reflection of what you're passionate about.
I think all of us would agree, Matt, that it's an admissions officer can tell when the candidate is writing what the candidate thinks the admissions officer wants to hear rather than what the candidate really believes and feels. And so you really want to be writing from your heart, writing about things that really matter to you, and not trying to figure out what's going to sell to the admissions committee. What do they want to hear? What kinds of person are they looking for? The coach will help you come up with those ideas of how to sell yourself and how to really be authentic in what you write.
Right. Okay, so thanks for getting us started with Booth. We're going to move to Columbia now. Karen, one of the things I guess with Columbia, recently they had, it was less of an essay, more like a tweet or even a tweetette. I think it was like 70 or 80 characters to describe your future career job title. Last year we were watching videos about New York and the heart of business. So, you know, the admissions office does play with essays and what they're trying to understand from a candidate. Do you like the essays that they've chosen for this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think they haven't changed much, to be honest. So it looks like essay 3 changed, but my philosophy on essay 3 is very similar to last year's essay 3, which was, who is a leader you admire and why? This year it's, what is your favorite book, movie, or song, and why does it resonate with you? And to me, those are pretty much the same thing. And the reason is because we don't really care about the leader you admire. We don't really care about the book, movie, or song. That's sort of an intro for you to, as Bill was saying, kind of tell us something about yourself that we're not going to see anywhere else, right? So very quickly explain your book, movie, or song, and then talk about, you know, what about you is relevant to that book, movie, or song, which is exactly what we did last year with who is a leader you admire, right? So yeah, I mean, I think they're on the right track here. And I'm glad they didn't change them too much because it's been a hectic year. So the rug was not pulled out.
No video with Glenn Hubbard that you need to watch anymore about New York and the heart of business. I mean, it still is a business school in New York and how that fits in. That might even sort of overlap with the first question that talks about career goals. Can you take us through that essay?
Yeah. I think Bill stole a lot of my thunder because it's very similar to the Booth essay one. So thank you, Bill. But I absolutely agree with Bill that that this is about, it's not just about your professional path, it's really about just who you are personally and why this is the right professional path for you. I think it's important to show that you understand where a CBS MBA can take you. So make sure that, for example, if you're naming companies you'd like to recruit at, well, are those companies that actually recruit at CBS? Typically, they probably often are if you've been thinking about an MBA for a while. CBS has pretty abundant recruiting. But if you're going to name specific roles or specific companies, you should know that CBS is going to open the door to get there. Also, what are the resources that CBS might have that will get you there? Some of that might go into CBS SA1, some might go into SA2. We might split it, kind of just depending on how your story shakes out. So there's kind of a nice kind of overlap that we can use across those two. But as Bill said, you want to show not just where you are going in the future, but where you've been in the past briefly in order to show why this future goal makes sense for you, right? So are you building on skills that you've already built in your current role? Or maybe your current role leaves you feeling some sort of void that you would like to fill with some sort of different role, right? And so we need to give a little bit of history in order to give some context to where you're going. And point 3, I already said, but again, it's not just about what you've done. It's not just about where you're going, but it's about really deep down who you are and why you're on this path in the first place. What's unique about you that has set you off on this path? What are your passions? What are your interests? So to me, it seems like a professional essay, but really deep down, it's just a personal essay, just like kind of any of the other less career-oriented essays are.
Right. And we talked about earlier on how in what is likely to be such a competitive year, maybe certain applicants will build out their target list of schools and apply to more schools. It gets easier because, of course, once you've really thought about your background, what you're bringing, where business school fits in, how that then fits in. But the next step is to make sure that it's really about the school that you're then applying to. So those career goals might be consistent, but one is for Booth and one is for Columbia. And I think the second essay really picks up on this idea of the school's culture at CBS.
Yeah, and CBS really likes to see that you know why CBS is the right fit for you. They don't want to think that they're maybe a backup for Wharton or Harvard, right? They want to know that you're really committed to attending, and they do that in a few ways. So CBS SA2 is obviously, where you can show that you have done your homework, you've spoken to students or alumni, and you've really learned about courses and clubs and treks and all sorts of opportunities that are unique to CBS. There's also, we were talking before about how the essays changed a little bit this year. So 2 years ago, the CBS essay question 2 was, as you said, Matt, a video where it was about CBS being connected to New York and being at the very center of business. And now they've changed it a little bit to be just more general, like, why is CBS the right fit for you? But I actually think they still want to see, why do you want to be at the center of business? Why is New York the right kind of campus for your business school experience? So it's also important to show that you recognize all of the opportunities that being in New York City will bring, and how CBS is very closely tied to New York City.
We'll be talking with Toby about this wonderful hub that sits on Lake Michigan that Kellogg opened, a couple of years ago. Columbia is still building this, and I don't know if it's been slowed down because of COVID in the last 6 months, but those that are applying for the fall of next year may get to send their second year. Even that might make a difference, right? In terms of the relationship of the school with the rest of the city, but also the sort of opportunities for, just collaborating with your classmates and discussions that you're going to have outside of class, the clubs, activities. I mean, there's so much going on at the school, and the potential to share that in your application.
Exactly.
With Brits, our voices never go up at the end of the sentence. You never know if it's a question or not. Essay number 3. Now, you touched on this, the book, the movie, the song, and don't take up all of that space with a really, really long title. So this is a little different. Talk us through what you think is the best approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mistake here is to just talk about the book, movie, or song and use up your 250 words, describing this movie that you really enjoyed, or the lyrics to a song, right? And it's nice that you remember it so fondly, but really the admissions committee doesn't want to know too much detail about, or in my opinion, about the movie or song. They want to know, why are you telling them about this book, movie, or song in the first place? So typically I like to introduce the book, movie, or song, and then I like to use that to introduce something about you, as Bill said, kind of something that we haven't seen before. So I actually, oftentimes with my clients, what we'll do is we'll work on essay 1 and 2, and then we'll say, do we have any gaps that we need to fill? Is there maybe an interesting extracurricular involvement that we weren't able to share somewhere else? Well, here's a great opportunity to do that. So sometimes I even tell my clients, like, it doesn't matter what the book, movie, or song is, we figure out first, what is the thing we need to say about it? I mean, I like to show kind of, again, personal qualities or a personal involvement. I think that this is a great opportunity to take you out of the office and just kind of, again, just show who you are. And then it's also a nice opportunity to tie that to who you will be at Columbia Business School. So maybe you use this book, movie, or song to introduce a nonprofit board position that you have, and then you can tie that to, at Columbia, I'll continue to be involved in organizations like this around New York City, right? So to show what that says about you for the future. That was pretty much all I got on CBS. I'm not sure who was next. Probably Brittany.
I think I'm up next, and I will go slideless. I feel like I'm jumping in at all the most awkward moments, but I'm gonna roll with it. So the MIT essays, if you saw the slides, I kind of put quote around essays, because they are essays in a sense. The cover letter is an essay in a sense, although it's very different than some of the other topics that have been presented today. So I want to talk a little bit about the cover letter, and I also want to talk about the video. I consider the video just as important as the cover letter. Really, you know, like I touched on earlier, I do feel that all of the components of the application are really equally important. But the video is very much like an essay because it's another component where you're supposed to really be telling your story and adding a lot of color and context to your application. So one of the things that Sloan talks a lot about is that your past is really the best predictor of your success at Sloan. And so they really use not only the resume, but the cover letter and the video to look at your past, determine what your future might look like there. And so in the cover letter instructions, the instructions are actually really pretty clear as to what they're looking for. You know, they let you know that they're on a quest to find applicants who have a really certain presence. So they're looking for thoughtful, you know, driven and determined leaders who are really, you know, doing exceptional things to try to make an impact in the world. They look for people that are independent and authentic and fearlessly creative. They say they really are looking for true doers. They also want people that are kind of willing to take risks and sort of redefine solutions to conventional problems, and also just really try to come up with cutting edge and new ideas to the solutions that matter to them. They also talk a little bit about how they demand integrity, and they also really, you know, love and respect passion. And so that outline is a perfect outline for you to be brainstorming ideas and stories for the cover letter. So one of the things that I actually have my applicants do is, you know, pick apart that initial, you know, section of the prompt and just do some brainstorming on all of those different aspects. You know, when have they really demonstrated thoughtful leadership or fearless creativity or cutting edge thinking, and try to pinpoint a really compelling and specific story that demonstrates that, and then use that as the story that they're telling in the cover letter. They do give you some guidance that they want you to use a professional story. So I do typically suggest going for something professional over something personal for the cover, and really just doing some concrete storytelling and showing them, again, this like kind of traditional essay writing, you know, feedback, really showing through stories and not just telling them who you are and what you're all about. I don't know, is Matt back?
Matt is just thinking if I was going through one of those Zoom interviews for my MBA. It's high stakes anyway, but it's a heat wave, and I'm one of those little attic under a lead roof in Paris, and my laptop just said it was too hot, so it stopped. So how to bounce back, I guess, would be equally true for an MBA interview. So I join you, Brittany, as you were talking through the essays, and I guess it's always this idea of sort of value added, right? What you present, there are all these different components. And you're trying to really give Rod Garcia and the team a very rounded sense of you, your passions, your experience, and the characteristics, qualities you bring to Sloan.
Yeah, and so what I was going over before, they give you a really perfect outline of what fit is for them, exactly the type of, you know, student that they're looking for, the type of presence that they're looking for in their students. And, you know, your job in the cover letter is all about, you know, like Bill has said, like Kara has said, you know, demonstrating fit for the school. And so really kind of reading the criteria for the cover letter, it's very clearly outlined for you, but also, you know, reading the student blogs and coming up with, you know, the times in your life where you have already displayed those qualities is going to be, you know, something that's really important in the cover first, and then also in the video.
All right, now you've worked with many successful M7 clients, including Sloan. You talk about this idea of, you know, showing and not telling in that cover. Did you have a good example to help you as to really make that distinction? Well,
I think it's just by using stories. So it's one thing to say, I'm a thoughtful leader who thinks creatively, who does, X, Y, and Z, sort of hitting all those points that we know that they're looking for. But you need to really show them by picking, and I think it's best to often pick one story from your professional career that maybe is touched on in your resume, but you really don't get to do, a deeper, more reflective dive through, and use that to showcase your sort of action orientation or whatever quality that you're trying to highlight as part of why you're going to be a really good fit for the program. So it's really just showing over telling, and the way that you do that is you use very specific, concrete stories, sometimes even a collection of stories, but you don't have a lot of real estate with the cover letter. And the other thing to keep in mind is you also have all of these different components of the application where you're going to continue to do storytelling.
Right. Now, of course, that includes 60 seconds for a video clip. It's not that it should be sort of Spike Jonze quality, but that's a very interesting piece. So it's not about quality; it's about content. What is the advice for that video essay?
Yeah, so very similar to what Bill touched on and Karen. So I like to look at this as, after we kind of do the cover letter, you have the other components of the application hashed out. What gap is there, right? Is there something that you haven't been able to discuss about yourself that's really a unique value add that you think you have to bring to the program? Or is there another, quality, characteristic, or trait that you feel will, again, just kind of double down on why you're a really good fit for the program? Similar to my advice for the cover, I prefer to do a deeper dive, with just one story here. But you can kind of go a lot of different directions for this. I do think you need to be intentional with the story that you choose, because there are some things that don't resonate maybe quite as well in a video format as maybe they do in writing. So that's something we take into consideration when we're brainstorming for the video.
So lots of examples, and I guess as this slide shows, it's storytelling, more storytelling, but then a different one. And even thinking, of course, of recommenders and the sort of stories or the examples and illustrations that they will be sharing, right? We don't need a needless redundancy, but each of these different components of the application can really speak to different parts of your personality.
And I think it's really important to sort of think about some of the advice that they're specifically giving you, which is they expect the video to add some color and some context to your application. So when I hear someone saying they want to see some color in your application, I'm not thinking about like shock value. They also make very clear they don't want a professional, video. It's supposed to be sort of, an iPhone self-edited thing. But I do encourage applicants to think about the types of students that they're looking for, to think about presence, and to think about the things in their life that are colorful. So I've actually had an applicant do this video in a place where he volunteered. So he wasn't just talking about that activity, but he actually was there in person, which added just, I think, like a really special element to the video. I've had someone do a video with their motorcycle without saying much more. There was a motorcycle involved in the video. And I've also had, I think one of my favorite videos was not sort of like that at all. It really was just a person sitting in their office at home, walking the viewer through a very, very specific story about a trait about themselves that was extremely memorable, and the impact that he was able to have on his friend group in college because of this trait. So it couldn't get any more simple than that. No shock value, no motorcycles, no crazy locations or anything, but just a very specific, pointed, personal story that made me feel at the end like I needed to meet this person in person. I wanted to be in class with this person because I felt like what he was describing, that could have an impact on me. So I do think that there's a lot of ways to make the video work. I think you should play to your strengths too. If you're not really comfortable on video or kind of going out or doing any editing, like you should maybe take a more simple approach. But I do encourage applicants to try to get that color in there any way that they can.
Right, and the authenticity, it's not like sort of showing up at a place that you claim to be volunteering and people's voices behind things. Sorry, do we know who that person is?
Yes,
The
that
motorbike
would be
sounds like
enough.
it might be illegal anyway, to be recording yourself riding at 120 miles an hour on a Harley. And but the third one, ultimately, if your comment of I really wanted to meet this person at the end of the video, perhaps is one of the most powerful messages that they could achieve at all. And as you've said on this final bullet point, it's holistic. It's not, you know, being all about the biz analytics person. It can be, you know, a very personal side of your story. They've already got lots of great information about you from your transcript and from your resume as well. So this really is opportunity. We talked about last week about the white space on someone's resume. You know, maybe that speaks to this final bullet point of sharing things that the school really doesn't know about you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, Bill and Karen have both mentioned this too. I mean, think about the gaps, think about what else is going to be important. And I do think that this is the type of ask that can often be helpful to brainstorm with others, because often we don't think things that are special about ourselves are special. So sometimes it can be good to, you know, pitch some ideas to someone that really knows you well. And don't be afraid to be honest, vulnerable, nerdy, whatever you are, you really should try to connect with your viewer through the video. I think it's a fabulous opportunity. I wish all schools had it. And I think that it's just a really unique place to showcase who you are and what you're all about.
Right. Now, Toby, as we turn to Kellogg, and of course, in those good old days when we could all travel, a campus visit to any of these 4 schools and the sort of insights, what you'd be able to pick up, discussions that you might have at the library or the cafeteria. There is this wonderful hub now at Kellogg. I'm always interested by this use of the word bravery in Kellogg's first essay. It talks about brave leaders and creating lasting value, and, you know, wanting an example of that and what you learned. So, you know, from your knowledge of the Northwestern culture, perhaps we can start with essay number 1 and some of your tips and advice for our viewers.
There we go. Sorry, that was inevitable. The global hub, you're right, is absolutely beautiful, and anybody that's, you know, brave enough to get on an airplane now, if you fly over actually and use your imagination, the building is actually in the shape of a K, which is exactly what you would expect from a place like Kellogg. But you're right, the essays themselves, just the writing of the essays, and I think probably this group is always, all of us have participated in the exercise of deciding what these essays are going to be, what the essay prompts are going to be for our programs. And Kellogg does a really great job of accomplishing the 2 most important things with these prompts, which is to give a sense of the culture of the institution and also provide the applicants an opportunity to share some specific information about themselves that's going to be useful in making admissions decisions. So to your point, right, the Kellogg brand is all about brave leadership and collaboration and individual and personal values and kind of where you stand with those. I think that when responding to these prompts, it's incredibly important to keep kind of 3 things in mind, right? Understanding the Kellogg culture is paramount, and understanding this culture of collaboration and teamwork is incredibly important. Second, and this is a theme we've heard today already as well, choosing the right story. Telling a story is going to be important. It's going to separate you from a large group of people that are kind of regurgitating pieces of the websites that they're a part of. But choosing the right story to tell and being your genuine self, kind of third, are very important. So to speak to this culture of Kellogg, former Dean Sally Blount described it as exemplifying impact without ego. And I really like the turn of phrase, right? Impact without ego. The problem as an applicant is that the application and the essay are very egocentric activities, right? You're writing about yourself, you're asking other people to write about you, you're talking about yourself. And so kind of finding that balance between humility and confidence is an important exercise to try to dive into, to try to understand a little bit more about within yourself. But this first essay as you mentioned, asks about examples that you've created value, and then what challenges did you face along the way. You may have a story in mind immediately, but I encourage students to utilize this kind of collaborative nature, collaborative piece that Kellogg is so proud of, and incorporate other people in your world into this experience, right? There might be some mentors or colleagues or friends or family that have ideas for stories for you to tell. And why wouldn't you take advantage of that network that you have within yourself? Asking what challenges did you face and what did you learn? It's a lot to pack into 450 words. So being concise in your storytelling is important. Overcoming challenges or innovating through a challenge are common themes, I think, in a lot of MBA essays. And what we're getting at is resilience, right? They're asking you to describe and identify your resilience so that they can have an understanding of your ability to manage kind of the rigor of these programs. I think that an applicant to Kellogg can take that a step further. Describing your own resilience is terrific, but if you can move that one more step and talk about opportunities that you've had or experiences that you've had to build resilience in others, to add value to the teams that you're a part of or environments that you've come from, the impact that you've had on others is really significant and going to be expected of you as a student at Kellogg. I think a common mistake in telling these stories of kind of overcoming challenges, though, is applicants can spend too much time kind of setting the stage and not enough time talking about the specific actions that they took or the specific choices that they made as a leader and how those impacted the people around them. Just something to keep in mind and be aware of. And I think that understanding that choosing the right story, focusing on how your actions had a positive impact on others, and those two things are really going to take you far in this first essay anyway.
I'm going to come back to your comment about Sally Blunt and put to all of the group the words of a dean and how they might sort of crystallize the culture of any institution. Now, the fact that it's brave leadership, this ties into your point about resilience, because just sharing one success after another, but it's sometimes in those tougher moments, and that's the grit perhaps that Kellogg is really trying to identify.
I think so, and I think it's also a great transition kind of into the second essay. The second essay starts with values are what guide you in your life and work. Clearly, they're telling us that bravery is something that they value highly, right? And in leadership and collaboration. And so being able to describe that in your life in some way, shape, or form is certainly going to go a long way. I think that these applications and the essays in general are really great opportunities for candidates to be highly introspective, right? And this requires it. Values are what guide you in your life. What values are important to you? If you can answer that very, very quickly, I think that you need to do some more work. I've had a chance to take some classes at Kellogg and do some executive education there. And one of the professors does a really terrific exercise that I would do with any clients considering this as well. She has us all write in one sentence, what do you do for a living? Describe what you do for a living in one sentence. And then answer the question, why is that important to you? Whatever you write next, you answer again, why is that important to you? And then you answer again, why is that important to you? And you're really drilling down. And after you've done that 3 or 4 times, you're getting really close to some important values in your life, in your world, and understanding what that is for you. And hopefully they circle a little bit around bravery and collaboration if you're applying to Kellogg. You've really had an opportunity to dive really deeply within yourself, and then you're presenting this, and we've all talked about it now, genuine picture of yourself to the admissions officers. I don't know if caveat's the right word. The next piece to keep in mind has come up, and that piece is being genuine and embracing your own story. And I think that there's this applicants feel compelled to figure out how they're a unicorn, and figure out how they are different from every single other person applying to each program. And what that can lend itself to is a disingenuous story. And as Bill and everybody else was saying, admissions officers can see through that very, very quickly. When somebody is trying to guess what it is that we want to hear, or embellishing some accomplishments, we've read enough and been around the block enough to know when that's happening. And so if your story is that of a traditional marketing professional or a traditional finance professional moving up a ladder, tell that story and tell it with some passion. Kellogg has certainly prides itself on bringing in a very diverse class, but the entire class can't be, social entrepreneurs that studied the didgeridoo. It's going to be a group of people that have a traditional background, and that traditional background, at Kellogg anyway, can be the piece that makes you an outlier in a lot of different ways sometimes. So for me, these essays, I think approaching them, like I said, with those kind of 3 points in mind: understanding the culture, choosing the right story, and being your genuine self, and the rest will take care of itself.
Now you've touched on something with the example of why you do something, why does that matter to you, and why does that matter to you, and keep digging deeper. I often share with inquiries to Fortuna, I'm fortunate to work with this wonderfully enthusiastic, insightful, very dedicated group of colleagues, but that will really push you as applicants to these business schools to dig deeper, to really understand and go that step further. Bill, coming back to you as we've looked at across all of the essays of these schools, Toby had just mentioned Sally Blunt at Kellogg, and this vision of impact without ego. Is the dean somewhere to look to really then understand that the underlying personality? You talked about academic rigor, a love of sort of analytical decision making at Booth, but should we be listening to what the dean has to say to get a better sense of the institution?
I think in many cases, Matt, yes, and certainly it's true at Booth that the dean does try to reflect in what he writes or says, and it has been he throughout its history so far, to give a sense of what the personality of the school is, what the key elements, what the features of the school that the school is most proud of. And so if you read the letters in the annual reports from the dean, or you read the dean's little blurb on the application or the website, you'll get a sense of what really is important to the school and how the school views itself. And I think that's an important thing to recognize, both for the candidate as well as for the application process, to make sure you're addressing some of those issues. So the deans are a reflection of the school. Even if they come from another school first, they tend to adopt and understand and resonate with the key personalities of the schools once they're there.
Right. Now, a question, because we've talked about bravery, we've talked about sort of a quant mindset. One of our viewers has a question for you, Karen. Bravery and leadership for Kellogg, creativity and authenticity for MIT Sloan. Do you think that Columbia has any specific theme or culture?
That is such a good question. Thinking. I think that Columbia, we talked about this before with SA too. I think that Columbia really wants to see how you'll engage with the community. They want to see that you're collaborative, you're a team player. It's a very social program. And so they want to see that you're not just going to take from the Columbia experience, but that you will also give to the Columbia experience. So I think that they like to see how you've engaged with and led teams in the past, how you will engage with their community on campus. Again, what are the specific programs, travel opportunities, clubs? Will you be on a Pangea team, right? So I think it's very much about being a culture carrier and a community member, as well as a leader within the communities that you're a part of.
Right. Brittany, someone's come up with a question that relates to the video. Someone had a question about if you recorded in a public space, if there are issues then of image rights and other things. I guess you want to be mindful how and where you shoot those videos. But they ask about tone. Now, my wider question, I know Rod Garcia, he's an incredibly thoughtful, a very funny man. Someone like Kurt at Chicago Booth, he's got a wicked sense of humor, at least I hope he does, with the socks that he often chooses to wear. Is the video a chance for humor? Is humor a high risk and potentially high reward strategy?
So I actually think humor is hard because what's funny is often in the eye of the person on the other end. But if you are a funny person and that is part of your tone, and you want to take a risk and try something out in that light in the video, I say go for it. But if you are not funny, I would caution against trying to do something funny. But I would also caution against doing anything that isn't you, because I think we've all talked about this today, that your presence needs to be authentic in all of your application materials. And if you're trying to be something you're not in a video is not easy for everyone, first. And on top of that, trying to be someone you're not, I don't see that working out well for most applicants. So I really would advise, sticking with, who you are and what you're all about. And you don't need to be funny, but your tone should reflect, again, if you have serious stories, maybe in other parts of the application, and you want to do something lighter for the video, go for it. Again, kind of look holistically back at everything, and do something that feels right to you.
Yeah, and we've talked about having that extra voice that can provide a depth of reflection and say, well, actually, if that was your central theme, I missed it, or you've tried to be funny and from my perspective, it falls flat. I think it can be, whether it's with Fortuna, friends, family, individuals that can hold up that mirror, I think can help you see that. Toby, we have a question from Manu. You talked a lot about that Kellogg culture and close-knit community, teamwork, and collaboration. For you, what is the best way to demonstrate your affinity to teamwork? Again, is it illustration? And perhaps is that better coming from one of your recommenders, or if it comes from you?
It's a great point bringing up the recommenders, because I think that there needs to be a through line with the stories between you and your recommenders. I think that choosing recommenders is a very important and often overlooked process, and having conversation, going to lunch, buy coffee, with whatever it is, with the people that you're going to ask to write recommendations for you is a very important thing, so that you can have conversations about the stories you're going to tell, and be able to both provide some similar examples, or at least share similar attributes or values for what it is that you're trying to present in your application, so that you're telling similar stories. But I do agree that if I tell you I'm a really hard worker, that doesn't do much. But if I can give you some examples of me putting in extra hours, or other people commending me for going above and beyond, that's going to leave a mark. And so providing examples and telling stories is certainly, I think, going to go much further than just stating some things that you think are true about yourself.
Right. Bill, the slide reminds us of fast approaching round one deadlines, or in the case of Columbia, applying early admission. And I would like Karen to speak to early admission and the advantages of that. But Booth's deadline is 49 days away, 7 weeks, for the sort of introspection, even for the sort of school outreach, but certainly as all of that thinking comes together in your essays. Let's assume that GMAT is, or GR is out of the way. Is it achievable in 7 weeks? And how would you encourage, perhaps 2 or 3 ideas of how to encourage viewers to structure their thinking in the next 7 weeks?
Yeah, definitely it's doable. But it's not a whole lot of time. So the first thing is to sit down and really think hard about why do you want to get the MBA, and what are your goals? How is it going to fit in? So that's kind of understanding where it is you want to go. The second is thinking through, and I think several folks, Karen and Brittany, talked about kind of brainstorming some of the things that you think make you a little bit different, and some of the stories you might tell that exhibit some of the characteristics that you think are going to be important in those essays. And then the third thing is to understand the schools themselves that you're interested in applying to. In this case, we're talking about Booth, is to fully understand the programs that are available, the philosophy of education, the approach that it's going to take, and make sure that that fits. And then once you kind of have that, and I'd say, you know, a week and a half or 2 weeks on that, no more, then it's time to start thinking about how am I going to put the pieces together? Where are my recommenders going to be? What do I want them to talk about? What am I going to say in my essays? And then begin to actually pull those pieces together. And it'll probably be a 2 or 3 or more week process to get those to the final stage where you're comfortable with all of them. So a lot of the upfront stuff, kind of the introspection that we've been talking about, is very, very important. And I think too many people try to skip over that and just go immediately to writing. And I think understanding the school, understanding yourself, and understanding where you want to go are critically important to making any successful application.
Right, right. So with that sort of groundwork, one of our viewers, Karen, has asked about early action at Columbia, which of course is sending the signal. You're saying if Columbia offers me a place, I will withdraw applications to other schools. That's a very powerful message. And you've been working with clients, have even been submitting through the months of July and August. But I mean, just go back to what we discussed earlier. You would never sacrifice trying to get this application to Columbia ahead of that deadline if then the final product really lacked the substance and the sort of resonance with Amanda Carlson's team.
Yeah. Absolutely. So if you're going to be ready by October 2nd, great. I do think there's an advantage in flagging to the school that they are your top choice and you're really excited to attend, and you have all these great reasons why. But let's say you're applying with a 660 GMAT and a few more months of studying would get you to a 720, right? So then you'll be a better candidate in the regular decision round, and I encourage you to wait. And same thing again goes with essays, right? They get a lot of candidates, and so you just want to be the best candidate possible, and timing is nice, but it's definitely not more important than being a strong candidate. I guess this conversation on timing is an important segue. I keep seeing a lot of questions pop up about J-term, and so I feel like this is also a nice opportunity. Well, I have the floor. I may as well address that. So there were a few questions about J-term and EMBA, and for me, it's really important that in your essays, you explain, maybe not even completely overtly, but you explain Columbia Business School class of 2050 out there, if you can hear them. Not sure if you can, but you need to explain why you're applying to the J term instead of the September term, right? And so if you're saying, I'm applying for the J term, but I want to recruit for investment banking or management consulting, well, then it shows that you don't exactly understand the difference between what the J term will offer you versus a September term. And similarly, if you're saying you are going back to your family business after business school, but you're applying for the September term, well, you kind of need to prove, like, what are you going to do over the summer and why aren't you applying to the J term? So your essays need to match to the program that you are interested in applying to, right? So that we see this logical step from where you are to the MBA program you're applying to what you're going to do afterwards. Any other questions that were popping up that anyone else wanted to chime in on?
I think we've lost Matt again. So I haven't seen any consistent questions coming through. There are a lot. Everyone can take a look at the video. Here's one again, Karen, maybe for you. Ideal date to apply for CBS given rolling decisions.
So the way that rolling admissions works is that the sooner you apply, the sooner you hear back. So the earlier you apply, the better off you are, again, from an admissions perspective, because the class keeps filling up, right? I do think schools are smart enough to know that, again, if you apply early with a GMAT that's far lower than the average, I think they're smart enough to understand their patterns and to know that they'd rather hold out for somebody who fits their criteria later, right? So it's not like you're going to trick them by applying earlier, but if you are ready to apply earlier and you're the best possible candidate you can be, there's certainly an advantage in applying as early as possible. So that's my answer. When to apply in regular decision, as early as you're ready. You may as well get yourself in line to be reviewed.
Well, I think we've hit our time limit. So I wanted to, on behalf of everybody, say thank you to all of you for sticking with us and through a couple of technical difficulties. Hopefully it was useful. The entire video, as well as all the other videos, are available. The prior videos available online, as well as 2 more sessions coming up in the next couple of weeks. So if you're interested in learning more about the essays at some of the other schools, international as well as some of the other domestic schools, please join us in the next couple of weeks. And thanks again for your time.
And as a reminder, because I know it's usually on the last slide, I think it already was on our last slide, don't forget, if you'd like to continue the conversation on our website, you can sign up for a free 30-minute consultation with us, and we're happy to chat. So yeah, hope to see you there.
Just one final word from me, because my panelists have been talking about leading bravely, showing resilience. Whenever the host keeps disappearing because his laptop has melted, I can only thank all 4 of you for showing that resilience and bravery. As Karen said, do reach out to us to talk through your personal stories and your business school goals. You can check out the upcoming webinars, of course, in the coming 2 Wednesdays, but also there's a whole wealth of material from the dream team at Fortuna to share advice, not just about the essays, but letters of recommendation, interviews, biodata application forms, everything, scholarships. And of course, we're very fortunate to co-host the Center Court MBA Festival, which means that we sit down with the gatekeepers from Booth, from Sloan, from Columbia, Kellogg, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, INSEAD, and many, many more. We'll be doing more of those events in October, but check out the videos from the gatekeepers and the idea of culture and fit that Bill, that Toby have both spoken about. And of course, as Karen and Brittany have emphasized, finding your story, your unique and personal voice. So thank you for bearing with my ups and downs connecting into this webinar. Thank you to all 4 of my panelists for their insights and sharing. And we look forward to having you next week for Berkeley, Duke, Anderson and Yale, and INSEAD, LBS, HEC the week after that. Thanks very much, everybody.